Meet your host, Helen Lipscombe, an expert in leadership and resilience. Joining us today is Steve Rabson-Stark, a specialist in purposeful leadership transformation.
Welcome to the Prepared Leader from Crisis to Confidence, the monthly podcast for leaders who know that tough times aren't a matter of if, but when. I'm Helen Lipscombe, and in each episode we explore bold strategies, real-world stories, and practical insights to help you lead with clarity, confidence, and resilience. Today's episode is all about what makes leaders resilient, how leaders adapt, support their teams, and navigate uncertainty with intention and courage. I'm joined by Steve Rabson-Stark from Then Somehow, whose work focuses on purposeful leadership, transformation, and unlocking the potential of people during change. Steve, it's lovely to have you on the podcast and really excited to continue this conversation. I think as a starting point, it'd be really good to hear from your perspective. I know you work within sectors such as the university sector that are dealing with some very challenging times at the moment and changing operation environments. It'd be great to hear what you're seeing in terms of leadership and how that is impacting on their ability to maintain resilience.
Well, it is an interesting time in universities, Helen. Like you talked about, where they are seeing several things happening. So costs going up significantly, student numbers are falling away because of lots of reasons, but these include changes to immigration laws and things like that. And in the past, universities have always been able to just sell more places, bring in more international students, but we are losing our international reputation. We are doing things at a kind of government policy level that are turning people away, and the universities are suddenly finding themselves a bit stuck. They weren't mentioned at all last week in the spending review. It's tough times. And this is coming off the back of COVID and all the terrible things that happened to the economy recently. And lots of them are finding that they're having to cut their cloth in ways that they haven't had to do before. So it's a really testing time. And this is when you find out whether you are resilient or not.
And what are you seeing in terms of how the leadership groups are changing, or how are they actually almost facing up to that? That's a huge storm of things that have happened over a very short period of time. Even if we go back to COVID, it's relatively short duration of history still. How have you seen them learn from that, or have you seen any learning?
Well, that is interesting. First of all, no one institution is the same as every other, but I'm definitely seeing patterns. I'm seeing some interesting patterns that I think are not helpful, or I'm really wondering, have they learned the power or the impact of an individual leader who may have come since those days? There was an awful lot of amazing stuff that happened in many organizations around COVID when there was no choice. People got organized and they made stuff happen. It was kind of amazing, made you feel quite proud that the wheels did not fall off. It was hard, but things got done. It's like, actually, we are resilient, maybe. Now I'm seeing examples where I question that. Maybe the fact that the crisis is more like, what's that awful metaphor about boiling frogs in water? So it's a slow thing, whereas COVID was like, bang. I think it's been slower. And you see these institutions where they realize, oh, we're not immune. We thought we were, and we're not. And we're now going to do that thing where we have to find 15% within a year or something like that. And what happens is you get this kind of great panic and this flurry of activity, and anxiety levels shoot through the roof. I was thinking about some examples I've seen recently, lots of places where you've got these really charismatic leaders who were really wowy when they were interviewed by their university councils and things. They're kind of like rock stars. I was chatting to one person. The rock stars are amazing and quite hard to work with sometimes. What are the behaviors that support resilience, and what are the behaviors that don't? One of the things I'm noticing, I've seen this in several places, where you have these really strong characters and they kind of work to their own executive boards, and they can be quite compelling in the way they present their vision or their strategy, which can feel like, yeah, that must be the right thing because it seems to make sense. But they can be really domineering, and you can find yourself in a situation where I might talk to somebody and they'll say, problem with my team is they never say anything. Like, they never come up with any ideas. I ask them questions, they just look blankly into space, and then I end up having to tell them what to do. Brackets, they're idiots or whatever. And of course, I'm like, maybe they're idiots, or maybe you're not really creating the right kind of space for them to feel that it's safe for them to speak up in. And so I think there's something really interesting about if you are leading an organization, or if you're in that situation where it can feel practically impossible to speak up, what do you do in those situations? And there are consequences. So, for example, I was chatting to someone recently and they were saying about how there was some big reorganization project that was going to streamline the student experience and save some money and bring a bunch of people into one building when there are different ones. And there was a really big drive to get this done by a date. By that date, they were in that space. Job done. Tick, the boss is happy. I nailed it. Saved a load of money. In the process, we didn't address any of the underlying process issues. We didn't do any of the work to harmonize them or align them. Everyone is scrambling around like crazy every day, trying to join up things that don't work. So this job is not done, but it is marked as finished and complete. Yeah. Money saved. The money's not saved because you're going to be paying for that down the line. Worse, people are burning up all of their discretionary effort and working long hours to make it work. It's gone. You've used it. You've spent that goodwill. And when the next shock comes, whatever that is, or the realization that it doesn't save enough money or whatever, that isn't going to be there anymore. And what you've got is a workforce that's exhausted, spent, traumatized, and incapable of actually responding in ways that you need them to. So you'll be constantly frustrated that nothing seems to be happening. It strikes me as really interesting. And another example of that would be, I've seen places where, and I think this is quite common in large complex organizations, where people come or they sit on those executive boards and they're really only bringing their own perspective to that table. If you come across that, any idea of team one and team two, we always imagine that if you ask me what my team one was, I go, well, that's my team. Yeah. The team that reports to me, right? And he's like, no. The team one is the one that you sit on, like your boss's team. You should be thinking about your role on that team as your first team. The team that you lead is your second team. That ideally should be run by the people on it with almost no need for input from you. People turn up to their executive meetings and they're wearing their team two hat. So they're just framing things about, how does this impact us? How do I defend my space? If I was at university, I'm there to protect my faculty and make sure it has the resources it needs. And not primarily to think about the viability of the whole institution. Whereas the moment you go into that meeting, you should be thinking holistically about the whole picture, possibly making decisions to the detriment of the area that you're responsible for because it's the right thing to do. If you're going in with the team two, you're basically competing with everybody else in that room. You haven't got a shared purpose and goal, and you're not really working for your boss, who might be the VC, for example, of an institution. You're there to defend your own domain. That's difficult. So if you're that boss, you've got a problem because, first of all, no one says anything. Secondly, if they do, they're defending their space. No one's on your team. They're only on their own teams. And this isn't really conducive to good, strong, resilient outcomes when shocks hit.
No, it seems like as you're talking about that, I'm sort of coming back to the concept I would often talk about that creates silos, because suddenly if you're coming in with that team two mentality, you're not working towards that shared purpose. You're not thinking about how this all connects. You are thinking about my area, that protectionism piece is a really interesting statement because that's often the case. I need to look after me and my own to some extent and focus on that, without realizing that that's just a very small part of an organization that will not exist and cannot continue to work if you're not doing that connection to your wider organization, which is where the team one thing really, again, to me, I can see that resonating with that resilient mindset and the right culture, because that is about we're all working together. And that might be to the detriment of what we actually do day to day, because it's about what's right for the organization as a whole, not just what's right for me and my own team.
Yes. And most of the problems that we have to solve now are complex and interdependent. So no one can solve it. I had a terrible story about somebody on a university council. And these are often above, like the board of governors.
Yeah, they're kind of the governors almost, or the board of directors. Yeah.
Yeah. And they're like, and so the story that I heard was, this person on this council was like, oh, our student satisfaction scores, the NSS they're known as, they've been trending down for years and they haven't been, and the question was, whose fault is this? What a terrible question to be asking your executive team. So you're saying, find me a scapegoat, find me one person that is causing student dissatisfaction. Well, what an astonishingly naive response. And not only that, but all that power that's associated with it, or the demand to find me that answer. What kind of witch hunt has that set out? Of course, student satisfaction is incredibly complicated. It might be about the teaching or the relationship with your tutor. It could be to do with the quality of experience of the support staff who run the buildings or who are providing the support services. Like a whole thing.
Choice. Like you said, there's a myriad of reasons why you may be unhappy in that environment. But also that, again, back to, and I know every time we have these conversations, Steve, I always come back to the culture, but the culture that is breeding, it's not giving people the opportunity to be open and talk about problems. It's about saying, if you tell me a problem, you will be the person to blame. If you highlight why this isn't working, then I'm going to point fingers at you. So it doesn't encourage that. Let's work together to resolve this. Let's work together to improve our scores on how students see this institution. It's the same principle for organizations when they're looking at employee engagement. This is not just one thing, it's everything working together and everyone has to play their role in that.
Yes. And of course, if you start saying who is to blame, people spend an enormous amount of time and energy not getting blamed, like trying to avoid blame. Or worse, get someone else blamed. It's not my problem. It's not my fault that this didn't happen. It's because they didn't do that thing. And of course, what should be happening is we should be chatting about how we tidy this up, because there's something about them coming from you to me that isn't quite working. How do we fix that? A terrible way of framing things. Instead, I'm very interested in this. How do you explore this interdependence? There's a lovely metaphor that we use. If you come across that very old, famous elephant story about blindfolded scientists, they're all touching elephants. This is a story from a Buddhist text called Udana from 2,500 years ago. It's a really simple kind of parable. Basically, these scientists, they're all touching an elephant, but they're blindfolded. They can't see it. So the person that's touching the trunk is like, this feels like the rope. It's the tusk. The tusk is a spear. The ear is a fan. The tail is a rope. With your eyes blindfolded, you've never seen an elephant before in your life. You've no idea how big it is. You've just been given this bit to touch, right? You've just had this narrow bit, but everything that life has taught you so far gives you a pretty good guess. This feels hard and sharp. It could be a spear. It's a pretty reasonable guess. But of course, you're miles off. And the only way you could ever begin to hope to understand that this thing is part of something bigger is to find out what people around you might be experiencing. Well, my bit doesn't feel anything. It's like soft and feels like a rope. So it's like, oh, it's not a spear then. This bit feels like a fan. Oh, right. I'm still no closer. Right. And of course,
you're getting a bigger, the picture's starting to grow. It's, you still don't know the totality, but it's not my particular view.
The point of the story is you cannot know. By definition, your perspective is a tiny portion of the potential truth. The only way you can have a full understanding of what is going on is to bring in all these different perspectives. So you have to start with the understanding that you're wrong. But we usually start because all our senses tell us that we're right. And then you have to go, hang on a minute, I'm only right from one angle. The view from here, but there's a 360. How do I get the rest of those views? I need other people to help me understand this.
Yeah. Oh, there's so much in everything you're saying that my brain is a little bit fried. But at the same point, I'm trying to think about, I suppose, coming back to when you started off and you talked about all of these different challenges that the organizations you've been working with have faced. So the COVID, where everyone adapted because there was this need to adapt, which I think from a resilience perspective, we often find that more adaptation happens at a time of crisis because suddenly you have to. The rigor and the process that we would often use to help us guide some of those decisions and guide us through these things gets loosened because suddenly we have to change, we have to adapt. And then you deal with something that maybe has crept along. And yes, it's something we could foresee, but people haven't necessarily seen it. And now suddenly they're dealing with those different environments. In both of those cases, you're going to have to change. One is the forced change, but in a more gentle way, or it's not even a force, you could choose to ignore. From your experience, what should leaders be thinking about when they're faced with those different kind of scenarios? What is it or what should leadership teams as a wider group be thinking about? What would make them better prepared for dealing with that myriad of different examples of disruption that's happening? It's not a big bang events, but it's things that create uncertainty, things that create challenges in a workplace that you need to be able to deal with and navigate through successfully.
Going back to that example I gave about the charismatic leader that's telling everybody what to do, by creating a really demanding environment, which probably does have kind of some threat and blame flavors chucked in, what they're effectively doing is silencing their executive team. They are not hearing all those different perspectives, and you are pushing people into defensive practices. So what happens, probably a few people will have quiet side meetings where they console each other. Nobody challenges. Why doesn't anyone challenge? Well, because you have someone like that, they might fire you. It's really hard to keep yourself safe in those situations. Maybe fears won't be realized, but there's something about psychological safety in all of this, isn't there? So if you're in a situation where no one's speaking, everyone agrees all the time, you're in big trouble. You're definitely not getting these independent solutions.
Yes.
Recognize any of that in your own team, then it's like, oh, interesting. I'm not backing you in that crisis. I'm thinking you're going to limp through it and you'll come out weaker. You will not come out the same. You definitely won't come out stronger. So you should be paying attention to how do you get people to talk to each other. And you can start this right in the meeting. If you're the one doing most of the talking, you have a problem. You need to find a way to bring that out into the group. I think this is not right. I think I'm getting it wrong. I think it's my fault. And I don't think I can fix this without your help. Yeah. We need to get to a place where we're all talking a lot and you're debating and I'm quiet and you're coming up with solutions and you're weighing the pros and cons. We've all got to find 15% cuts. So, okay, but I've just built my team up. So that's going to be awkward that I'm now going to have to cut. My team could bring in revenue. If I don't make the gesture, you're all going to resent me. What's the right thing? Should I do that and suffer the consequences because you're telling me that's what I must do? But actually, if I didn't, I might be able to help. Where do I do it? In a low psychological safety environment? That's quite a difficult conversation to have. Maybe we'd all be like, Steve, no, actually, we get it. We'll manage the bitterness in our teams, but you keep bringing in the money. Or do we say, no, let's all do that? Let's
all take the cut across
because
the board.
It has to be fair. It's important to this institution.
Yes, let's make it equitable rather than protect income generation.
I don't know what the right answer is, but we should be having that chat. People will be pretending to cut and then not. If you're in charge and you're talking all the time, you've probably got a problem. You should be listening. I love that team one, team two. I think it's a brilliant metaphor. So we could be talking about that. But we've also got to think about how do we encourage this down into the organization? What are the ways we could normalize or facilitate a kind of permanent state of interconnectedness? How do we currently organize work or solve problems? Do we have cross-functional project teams? Do we train people in facilitating those kinds of things? The crisis is not the time to find out that you're good or bad at this stuff. You want to be practicing it all the time. What are your low risk or your everyday opportunities to intentionally, with your eyes wide open, try to do things in different ways? Take universities, for example. They are very sensitive to hierarchy. There's a primacy towards academics over professional services colleagues. There's a primacy towards research over teaching, over leadership. There's a real academic leadership is a critical enabler, but it's a hugely undervalued skill. Most people who end up in leadership roles get no training or induction. They're there because they're really good researchers, not because they're good at running things. This is
not a great starting point. It's interesting because I've spent a lot of time working at NHS organisation, and you see similar traits there because absolutely appropriately or not, maybe it's just the nature of the organisations are that you promote within, but you're promoting from people that are either they are initially lecturers or researchers, or they're not clinically based, and they're not taught how to be leaders. I mean, often people aren't taught how to be leaders. If you're looking at anybody, what do you see as the right attributes of a leader? What should individuals listening to this be almost thinking? What are the attributes I should be reflecting? To that point of not being the loudest person in the room is a really interesting point to challenge yourself on. Am I hearing my team and giving my team space to do that? Organizations often promote people that aren't natural leaders and don't train them in that.
Yeah.
So what can people do to develop the right attributes that can help them in these scenarios?
I think that we prize our stars, our technical superstars is one thing. So then we can overpromote them. We ask them to do things they can't do. The other thing is, and I've seen this in software development, where the only way you can get a promotion is to start managing someone. If you're a software engineer, the kind of skills that make you brilliant as a software engineer, although I don't want to be stereotypical.
No, but genuinely, I
know some brilliant people.
A lot of software engineers would agree with that. They didn't get into it to manage people.
The only way you're going to get a pay rise is to manage people. You kind of have no choice. Yeah. So it's much more common now to see technical development pathways where you don't need to be a manager, because why would you want to do that? It sounds like it's really horrible. Just all the things you hate. No, what you can do is, here is a pathway for improving your technical excellence, and we will reward you for that. You can become, a master journeyman or whatever the thing is. Well, that's interestingly gendered language, isn't it? Yeah. Master journeyman. Interesting. Never noticed that.
Yeah.
I think that's one of the things that other organizations should be thinking about as well. Celebrate and have those management trajectories, right? I think they're really important, but we give those to people and equip them with those skills, and then have other pathways so that you're not putting people in who aren't going to succeed. I think that's interesting.
As you say that, I reflect on my own career journey. Now, I knew quite early on I did not want to manage people. I have on occasion managed people, but it was never what I wanted to do, because I wanted to be an expert. I enjoyed doing resilience, helping organizations and getting them to be prepared. Management, yes, it's where the money is, but it also took me away from doing what I really love, what I'm passionate about. So very quickly made that choice. It was something that I made the choice, and I built my own career pathway. To your point, it wasn't something that I felt like I could stay in any particular organization and then become a technical expert. It was something that I had to then recognize that if I wanted to stay in an organization, that the only real journey was to go into a leadership management role. I didn't want to do that, so therefore I moved organizations. It sort of started the journey again. Yes. It's, for me, the right thing to do, because I say I love doing what I do, and I've helped lots of different organizations by doing that. But maybe for some looking at that, they're kind of like, well, you've never really developed your own maturity in terms of business pathway. It's your point of, for some people, that technical specialist pathway is now what people are thinking about. It strikes me as, for some individuals, you have to create that yourself, because some people do realize that they don't want to manage people. And most people who do manage big teams have always said, if you don't have to, stay away from it, because it's super stressful. It's very challenging, and people are individuals and have their challenges. And that's what you are dealing with day in, day out, which comes back to, what are those attributes? You have to be a good leader. You have to be empathetic. You have to be able to be open, be listening, not come in with, I know the answer, or solution, because often that's come back to, and this is probably where my management style would have come in. I was always coming from a coaching perspective, because I was like, I know the answer, but I also know you know the answer. So I'm going to get you to tell me the answer. But that is a style that that worked for me, but a lot of other people wouldn't do that. A lot of people, to your point earlier, would come in and say, I know the answer and I'm going to tell you the answer.
Yeah, and maybe the real leadership skill is, are you riddled with self-doubt? Do you think you're an imposter? Well, these are the qualities we're looking for, actually, because you're probably going to check a lot and think really carefully. And that's probably more helpful than thinking you know the answer, because you almost certainly don't. Yeah. I'll give you another example. We're doing a project with a client recently where we've been looking at a lot of their internal data, and they love data in this organization. Okay. And they keep saying, just tell me the answer. And I'm saying, I can't tell you the answer, because we could interpret this data differently. We're categorizing these roles in certain ways, and they're different from the ways you used to do it. We could have a debate about that. Either you or I could be right about that. We've got choices. It turns out there are very few facts. So you want me to tell you what to do. I'm saying, I can't tell you what to do, but I can tell you that you're heading in slightly the wrong direction. And if you changed in this direction, it would probably be better. But all of those factors will change how we might want to make decisions about what comes next. We're often overly concerned with finding a single point of truth, a singularity. And the more I look for these, the harder I find they are to spot. I'll give you another example. Someone said, I used to work for this institution, and we realized we were in trouble. We thought the deficit was like X million. And then I looked at them and I was like, it's not X, it's X plus Y. It's much worse than anyone realized, but we didn't have the skills. And it's like, well, that changes things. The data only tells us so much. We can't rely on it too much. I can't tell you the answer because the answer will be wrong within seconds. Things change. You talk about managing. Why is managing people so difficult? Because they don't do what they're supposed to do. They're people. They get sick. They have emotional crises. They do outrageous things like start families or have aging parents that need looking after. Who knew? The one thing we know is that it will never be certain. It will never not be ambiguous. It will constantly change. And so it goes back to the idea of planning is useful, but plans are not worth the paper they're written on. If you're thinking about this from an organizational leadership point of view, if things change all the time, there's no point in having the answer. What you really need is a kind of process for constantly reevaluating the data that comes in, making sure you've got all these different perspectives, helping people feel confident or helping them reframe their identity in this uncertainty. So that reminds me of another story. Someone's like, we're going through this big reorganization and I've been at 6s and 7s for weeks because I've not known if my job is, but I just found out I am going to have a job. It's not this job, but it's going to be a similar job. Finally, I feel like I can help my colleagues. Oh, well, what's been going on? Well, it's been really hard to be helpful and considerate and collegiate and a good citizen because I've been so worried about my own needs. So it's like they're putting the mask on first on the airplane, And as a result, well, what does it look like? So, I can't get anyone to sit on my recruitment panels because that's like a discretionary effort or it's extra work, isn't it? And everyone's like, I've got to focus on not losing my job.
With the same scenario, which is, I don't know what tomorrow holds. Everyone feels very uncertain. And therefore, it's focusing on the bare minimum because that's what I need to focus on right now.
Now, you might come back to me and say, well, hey, Steve, wouldn't you like somebody who was strong and charismatic and had a really good idea and that we could all just latch on to? It's like, yeah, you know what? I do get that. Better to have an idea than no idea.
True.
Except that the problem with that is it's an empty promise. There isn't certainty at the end of that.
But an idea is just that, isn't it? Until you trial it, you see how it works, how it's going to be delivered, how does it work within existing process, existing structures, existing ways of working.
Is it better to pretend it'll work or is it better to say, this might work, why don't we try? And if it doesn't, we'll change it. And maybe that should be our mode of operation. An organization, if we were really good at that, have an idea, try it out, tweak it. That kind of iterative, agile approach might be much better for us than holding on too tightly to the answer.
Do you find that when people are very focused on the answer, that they almost have perfected the answer before they talk about it? Or do they get back to that kind of iterative trial and error? I suppose the answer changes. So if we spent all of our time trying to perfect the answer, we're almost losing the question. Trying something, just getting something started is sometimes better because actually then you are moving forward. Momentum is happening.
Data. Is this the answer? No, but at least we've started and we can change it. We've got some data.
The agile bit really resonates with me on that. That's part of those principles, isn't it?
There's another consequence of that. Making sure you've got the answer right before you tell anyone is that all the time you're not talking to them, they feel excluded.
Yeah.
Imagine this. I'm like, we've got this problem, Helen, but don't worry, I've got the answer. And what might happen is that you go, well, okay, so what do you want me to do with that? There's nothing I can do with it. You obviously don't want my input.
Exactly.
You don't want my ideas. You found an answer. It doesn't feel like a very good answer, but you're obviously not interested in talking to me about it, so I'm not going to say anything.
Yeah.
Whereas, of course, if I'd said, Helen, this is the problem. I don't know the answer. I think we should find ways to get some data and talk about it. Maybe we can come up with something we could try that might get us a bit closer to it. And you go, well, that's really interesting because I happen to know this and this. I had no idea you knew that and that. Do you think we could use those things? I think we probably could. Let me ask Sarah down the road. She might be able to help with that. Do you know what I mean? It's a problem. It's a problem, shared problem.
It's coming with the problem rather than coming with the answer. Again, it's about saying, this is what we need to resolve. Even if you do think you have the answer, it doesn't come in with the answer. Come in with, let's talk about what the options are, because you might not know all the information. There are often different ways of doing things. Part of the excitement about working with people is we all have different perspectives and different views. The richness of a team working together is you get different perspectives, and it's being open to that and not, I don't know the full answer. I don't know everything, because if I did, I mean, then there'll be really not much point in any conversations after that.
Part of me is like, oh, Helen, tell me the answer, please. Just make me safe. Can you be my parent? I could do that. But then you will be diminished, reduced. You will not grow. You will be dependent on me forever. And that's probably not what my organization needs.
When an event happens and when we deal with the disruption, that's when I have certainly seen people be surprised when people sort of look to you to go, well, tell me what to do. But I want you to lead now. But you haven't equipped me to lead. You have never given me the authority to lead because you've always given me the answers. And now you're expecting me to suddenly step up and act differently and take responsibility. And, you touched on it earlier. A lot of this should come out when you do have scenario discussions and you kind of start to tease out, well, actually, how would people behave? Are people aware of what's expected of them and aware when they should be stepping up? I've seen so many organizations that are surprised when people look to leadership to lead in a disruption because what they've not realized is that's how they have almost infantilized people by saying, we don't want you to take decisions.
This is interesting, and you're making me think about, like, I've shared lots of stories about where it's broken, but I want to share one about, I was really impressed by this approach where, again, this was a university setting and a new VC was coming in and she's like, I need them to think about the bigger picture. And she said, what I'm going to do is I want to do an institution-wide listening exercise, and I want my board members, the executive team, to lead it. I want them to listen. She was really specific. They're there to kind of introduce and say, these are our challenges. We're having this kind of existential crisis. What ideas have we got for saving money or bringing in more students? And then they had to be quiet and they had to listen. The point was, go and find out what actually happens in your part of the institution. What is it that people are doing all day? And listen to their concerns and don't at any time tell them what's going to happen. It's a really interesting idea. What she was trying to get them to do was have some empathy for and understanding of what's actually happening at the coalface. And then they came back all excited with all of the things they'd heard, like, oh my God, light bulb moments. And then they're sharing them with each other. This is a very different kind of conversation that is now happening in front of her. It was the first time these people had put on their Team One hats properly and discovered that there was far more they didn't know than they did. I really thought that was an interesting way of approaching things.
It's really interesting. Again, someone listening to this and they can hear all of these different things you're talking about, how they could mimic that kind of situation in their own organization. What might be the 2 or 3 things that they could do to try and
question.
Break it down a little bit. For some people, that might be a bit of a step too far to start with.
I think there's something about, first of all, noticing what happens immediately around you. Who's doing most of the talking? And how do you intentionally shift that so that everybody is contributing? There is this principle of isomorphism. What happens in one place will happen somewhere else in the organization, up or down. You can't change all, you can change your bit. That's one thing you could do. We did a project recently with an organization and they came up with this long list of things that could be improved. And it was very interesting. After a year of working together, we looked at the list and lots of things shifted. We don't think about the issues in the same way. For example, several of us need the same thing from another part and there's no way of coordinating that. And it's like, we should fix that. It's like, and then if you look at it later and go, no, we don't need to fix that. We've started to work together more. All the people that need to be involved have come together and had a kickoff meeting, which we never did before. Along the way, the little crunch point just got swept up because it wasn't the point. The point was it was an issue because we didn't have a mechanism for sharing information.
Yeah.
And now that we do, it seems to resolve itself. And that struck me as really interesting. The second thing would be, who is everybody who could be affected by this in the room? That could be like, we've got a problem, we need to fix this project. Let's have an open meeting. This is a problem for us. We'd like to solve it. Anyone who thinks they might have skin in the game, please come along. We're going to do it over the lunch table sandwiches. And you're like, oh, you came. Why are you here? Well, because this really matters because of X, Y, Z. I had no idea. So I really like that. It wasn't then that all those people had to work together. They wanted to input. And then they did the racy thing where it's like, I just want to be informed. I should be consulted. You guys are going to do it. I'll sponsor it. It was brilliant. I think that's a really interesting way of like, is everybody in the room?
Yeah.
What else could be good? The other thing that's always helpful, and you talked about culture and where the things get blocked or where culture kind of gets, we are culturally shy of having the difficult conversations. If listening is the superpower, then the upgrade on that is learning how to have the difficult conversations. Yeah. How much effort goes into avoiding? I could think of 3 or 4 restructures that were all done because nobody wanted to have a chat with a person that was really difficult.
Very
Like,
interesting.
you just needed to have a chat with them. And the other thing is, we're frightened of conflict, but when you go there, it's always better than you think.
It wasn't as bad. Or
Well, I had no idea. That makes me feel terrible.
Mm.
Thank you for telling me. I can do something about this now. Or I remember one time I was asked, could we do a 360 with this person? Because they're not listening to me and I need them to change. We'll do it. They were super nervous because they kind of knew it's like, if I got loads of really bad feedback, it's actually what you have got is some really balanced feedback. We have a 360 tool that's got no numbers in it, purely qualitative. I said, well, we'll go through it. And obviously, they did obsess about the things that were problem. But what was brilliant was the people who were having real difficulty with this individual were like, we love you for all of these reasons. You're brilliant. And then you do this, and it's horrible. You make us feel so small, and we're just frightened of you, basically, was the subtext.
Wow.
And this person was like, oh my God, that is not who I want to be.
No, like you say, and they were almost surprised and pulled up by that because they just they weren't aware of that.
They weren't aware of it. And then she said, this is all to do with an experience I had where I got seconded out and I was abandoned, and then I came back and I have not been able to get over it. I am consumed with rage for the way I was treated. And then she said, I need to leave. This is brilliant. It's so clear to me now. And it's because I'm so stuck. And my stuckness is causing me to behave in ways I don't want to be. She's like, that's it. I am going to work. And it was a brilliant moment. It was not at all the intended purpose of the interaction. She was like, this has been really, really helpful. It's suddenly really clear. Like, how can I be that? That is not who I am. And if all the time I'm here, I'm going to be like, I need to go. It was really interesting.
This came out that way, very different perspective, but helped to, like, by going through that process, that person then was able to reflect, I don't want to be that person. But also, why am I that person? Sometimes you don't realize how your behavior is being seen, what you're exhibiting, until somebody pulls you up on it.
I remember working with another person. They were like, I've got to have this really difficult conversation. I'm really frightened of it. I'm a bit scared of this person. They went for my job and that got it. And I said, I'm basically a really bad manager because it's got to this. And I was like, well, hang on a minute. Tell me the story. Well, it was a bit tricky. I brought it up and then we had a chat about this. And now it's come to this. I said, what do you mean? You've tried everything. You're a brilliant manager. You've done all of these things to try to solve it. And now I actually have to face the fact that it's intolerable. You're going to have to tell this person that you can't actually work together. If they cannot change, they cannot continue in this way. We've done everything we could informally.
You've gone through all the appropriate steps. You've done the best you can.
And once again, loads of fear and anxiety in the run up to that chat. Having the chat, I thought, how did it go? It's like, it went really well. I mean, they were really upset that they made me feel this way. That wasn't their intention. Bear in mind, this is the manager admitting that they felt really insecure around them, so there was this vulnerability thing going on. Sincerely sorry that they'd done that. And I'm really grateful that we had the chat, so there's an opportunity to change something. Having the conflict is often the beginning of a much better relationship. Not having the conflict keeps everyone in that tension and so on. So that is a critical skill.
Isn't it? When there is that tension and general unhappiness, some people will know it's there but won't know why. Some people know it's there and why it's creating a huge amount of tension. It's a bit like the problem shared as a problem halved. The minute you start to talk about it, it's uncomfortable. We're talking more specifically about British people. It's not natural to face up to that. However, we can all come back to experiences of when we did it, suddenly you're like, oh, I can breathe again.
Yes.
My shoulders just drop. All of the physical manifestations which you don't even realise are there. It just goes.
What's that doing to our bodies, and our health? And of course, it's not just you. It will be them and everybody who's caught up around the edges are all affected by this. You're bringing it back to resilience. Yeah. If you don't develop the skills and let people practice these skills, this is weakening your organization. It is limiting its ability to respond. So I think that is the third thing I'd really encourage people to think about. Learning to go there, learning how to have safe conflict, because it's from that really strong relationships flow.
Brilliant. It's amazing. I feel like we could do this for the whole of today and keep going. This is a really interesting conversation. If people would like to continue this conversation with you and hear more about the work you do, or if they're listening to this and going, I really need Steve to come and help me, how can they contact you?
So steve@thensomehow.com, or visit the website, thensomehow.com, or connect with me on LinkedIn.
Yeah.
We have a LinkedIn newsletter now as well about reimagining leadership, particularly in HE, but I think it has a broader thing.
Mm.
There's practical tips, ideas and reflections in that. So yeah, get in touch. Always up for a chat.
There's a lot in this to talk about. Brilliant. Again, Steve, it's been really, really good. And thank you for joining me on the Prepared Leader. If you found today's episode helpful, please follow, rate, or share it with someone who's navigating leadership under pressure. Until next time, stay ready and stay resilient.
Thanks, Helen.